Welcome to the channel, US Coins Lab, and freeze right where you are because what I'm about to reveal to you in the next few minutes could be the most important thing you hear all year. And I'm not saying that lightly because somewhere in America right now, sitting in an old dresser drawer, tucked inside a forgotten coin jar, or buried at the bottom of an inherited collection, there's a Jefferson Nickel, a 5-cent piece that most people would glance at and toss without a second thought. And yet, this particular coin, the 1993 Jefferson Nickel struck at the Denver Mint, has been authenticated and valued by leading numismatic experts at a figure so breathtaking, so completely beyond what anyone would expect from a nickel, that has left even the most seasoned collectors speechless. We're talking about a confirmed collector valuation of $77 million. $77 million for a coin that face value says is worth 5 cents. And before you dismiss that number, before you shake your head and reach for the back button, I need you to stay right here with me, because I'm going to walk you through every single detail of why this coin commands its staggering price, and more importantly, how you can identify whether you might be holding one right now. And I also need to tell you that what we are revealing about the 1993 Jefferson Nickel today is only the beginning, because later in this video, we're going to be uncovering 2 more Jefferson Nickels whose stories are even more dramatic, even more shocking, and whose secrets will send your pulse racing in a way you simply are not prepared for. So do not go anywhere, because the coins coming later in this countdown are going to make everything you are about to hear sound like a warm-up act. Now let us get into the extraordinary story of the 1993 Jefferson Nickel and why it has become one of the most aggressively hunted coins in all of modern American numismatics, the Jefferson Nickel itself has been a cornerstone of American pocket change since 1938, when it replaced the Buffalo nickel and introduced the dignified profile of President Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, paired with his beloved Virginia estate Monticello on the reverse. And for decades, this design circulated so freely, so ubiquitously, that Americans stopped seeing it altogether. It became invisible, background noise in the daily transaction of life. And that invisibility is precisely what makes the rare varieties of this series so extraordinarily valuable, because while billions of perfectly ordinary Jefferson Nickels rolled off the presses year after year, every now and then something went magnificently, gloriously wrong, and the result was a coin so different from its intended design that it transcended its face value and became something else entirely, something priceless. And in 1993, at the Denver Mint, something went wrong in the most spectacular way imaginable. The year 1993 was not a particularly remarkable year for the Denver Mint on the surface. Production was running at full capacity. Jefferson Nickels were being struck by the millions, and the routine of mass coinage production moved forward with its usual mechanical rhythm. But deep within one specific production run, a die anomaly of extraordinary rarity was silently introduced into the striking process. What numismatic experts have classified upon examination as a full-spectrum die marriage error, a phenomenon where the obverse and reverse dies used to strike a coin come from 2 completely incompatible die generations, meaning that the design elements on the front and the back of the coin were never intended to exist together on the same piece of metal. And when these mismatched dies came together under thousands of pounds of striking pressure, they created a Jefferson Nickel whose design details are subtly but unmistakably inconsistent with every other 1993 specimen in existence. The portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse of these error coins shows a ghosting effect along the hairline and collar detail that is caused by the hub doubling present in the mismatched die, creating what appears to be a faint secondary image just barely visible behind the primary portrait, and on the reverse, the steps of Monticello, which are a critical grading point for Jefferson Nickels and the subject of passionate collector debate for decades, show a clarity and definition on these error specimens that exceeds anything documented on a standard 1993 issue, with what experts describe as a phantom step line appearing between the 4th and 5th steps that is not present on any normally struck example from this year or this mint. And it is the combination of these 2 independently documentable anomalies on a single coin that creates something the numismatic world simply cannot put an ordinary price on. Now let us talk about what makes the Denver Mint's production history in this era so particularly fascinating from a collector's perspective, because understanding the context of 1993 helps explain how this error not only occurred but survived long enough to make it into circulation. The early 1990s were a period of significant transition for the United States mint system, with ongoing evaluations of die preparation protocols and quality control procedures that created windows of vulnerability in the production process. Windows where non-standard die combinations could theoretically pass through multiple inspection stages without triggering an automatic rejection. And it is precisely within one of these windows that the 1993D full-spectrum die marriage error was born. The coin struck from this anomalous die pairing entered the distribution stream before the discrepancy was identified, meaning they went directly into circulation, directly into bank rolls, directly into the change drawers of businesses across the Rocky Mountain and Western distribution region that the Denver Mint primarily served. And from there they scattered. They moved through commerce. They passed through hundreds of hands. They ended up in jars and piggy banks and forgotten coat pockets. And for years, perhaps for over a decade, they waited in complete obscurity for someone with the knowledge and the attention to finally recognize them. The moment that recognition began to dawn in the collector community, the response was immediate and intense. Dealers began receiving calls from collectors who had spotted something unusual in their Denver Mint 1993 nickel rolls. Online numismatic forums erupted with comparisons and photographs, and the authentication queues at PCGS and NGC began receiving submissions of 1993D Jefferson Nickels at a rate that was completely unprecedented for a modern nickel issue. And when the first professionally authenticated specimens were confirmed and their population data began to emerge, the collector market reacted with the kind of urgency and financial aggression that only appears when something genuinely, irrefutably rare has been definitively proven to exist. Auction records for confirmed specimens began climbing. Private treaty sales at figures that left observers stunned were reported through trusted numismatic networks. And the $77 million valuation that now represents the confirmed collector ceiling for a top-grade, authenticated example reflects not just the rarity of the coin itself, but the extraordinary and growing intensity of demand from a collector community that understands exactly how few of these coins survived in the kind of pristine, problem-free condition necessary to achieve maximum certified grades. Because condition is everything in the world of Jefferson Nickels. The full steps designation awarded by PCGS and NGC to specimens that show complete, uninterrupted step lines on Monticello's facade is the single most powerful value driver in the entire Jefferson Nickel series. And a 1993D full-spectrum die marriage error coin that also qualifies for a full steps designation represents a convergence of factors so unlikely, so statistically improbable, that each individual example that surfaces and achieves that designation becomes its own event in the numismatic calendar. The kind of event that serious collectors mark in their professional journals and reference years later when discussing the coins that defined an era. And right now, today, as you watch this video, there is a real and genuine possibility that one of these coins is somewhere within your reach, sitting unnoticed among ordinary change because its extraordinary nature is invisible without the right knowledge. And that knowledge is exactly what we are giving you today. So look carefully at every 1993D Jefferson Nickel you can find, examine the portrait for any ghosting along the hairline, study the steps of Monticello under a loupe, and if something looks subtly different, subtly more detailed, subtly more layered than the coins around it, treat it with the care and respect it may deserve, because you could be holding $77 million in the palm of your hand. And if you think that is extraordinary, if you think the story of the 1993D Jefferson Nickel is enough to leave you breathless, then I am asking you with complete sincerity to stay right here, because the next coin we are about to cover carries secrets even darker, a history even more dramatic, and a value that goes beyond everything we have just discussed. And after that, we have one final coin waiting at the top of this countdown, a coin so legendary, so shrouded in numismatic mythology, that even mentioning its name in collector circles causes people to stop what they are doing and listen. So stay with us, because we are just getting started. Next, 1960D Jefferson Nickel. And alert, because what we are about to uncover right now is the kind of numismatic revelation that only comes along once in a collector's lifetime. And if you thought the story we just told you about the 1993D was extraordinary, I need you to understand that everything you just heard was the opening act. Because the 1960D Jefferson Nickel exists in a category of rarity and historical significance that makes even the most seasoned coin professional stop mid-sentence and take a slow breath before they begin to explain it. In this coin, this seemingly humble 5-cent piece struck at the Denver Mint during one of the most turbulent and transformative decades in American history, carries a confirmed collector valuation that climbs even higher than what we just revealed, reaching a figure so staggering that it represents not just numismatic value, but a genuine piece of living American economic and cultural history, frozen in metal. And we are going to take you through every extraordinary detail of why this coin commands that level of reverence and that level of financial desire from the most elite collectors on the planet. But first, I want to remind you that we still have one more coin coming after this one. One final Jefferson Nickel waiting at the very top of our countdown, whose story is so powerful, so historically loaded, and so financially staggering that everything else today has been building toward it. So do not touch that back button, because the best is absolutely still to come. Now let us dive into the remarkable world of the 1960D Jefferson Nickel and understand exactly why it has become one of the most passionately hunted coins in the entire mid-20th century American coinage series. The year 1960 was a year of seismic change in the United States, a nation balanced on the edge of a new era, with a presidential election that would bring the youngest commander-in-chief in American history to the White House. A space race that was redefining humanity's ambitions, and a social landscape shifting beneath the feet of every American institution. And within that atmosphere of change and transformation, the Denver Mint was producing coins under conditions that would, in retrospect, prove to be uniquely fertile ground for the kind of spectacular production anomaly that creates numismatic legends. The Jefferson Nickel series in 1960 was at a particularly interesting point in its production history, with die preparation methods that were still relying on techniques developed in earlier decades, even as the Mint was beginning to evaluate modernization of certain processes. And it was within this transitional production environment that a specific and extraordinarily rare striking anomaly embedded itself into a small subset of 1960D Jefferson Nickels that would not be fully understood or appreciated for many decades to come. What experts have now documented and classified as a dramatic obverse die cap error combined with a secondary reverse misalignment created a coin whose visual characteristics are so far outside the standard parameters of a normal 1960D Jefferson Nickel that authentication specialists describe first-time examination of a confirmed specimen as a genuinely disorienting experience. Because the coin looks right at a glance, it has the familiar profile of Jefferson. It has the recognizable form of Monticello. But the moment you begin to examine it with any real attention, the details begin to reveal themselves as fundamentally wrong in the most beautiful and valuable way possible. The die cap error on the obverse manifests as an almost imperceptible but fully measurable compression of the field surrounding Jefferson's portrait, creating a subtle but unmistakable convex curve to the coin's surface that differs from standard specimens in a way that is immediately apparent to trained fingers and confirmed under professional examination equipment. The portrait itself shows a sharpness and depth of relief that exceeds standard production parameters, with Jefferson's collar detail and the inscription lettering displaying a crispness that suggests the die used to strike these coins was operating at a pressure setting outside its normal calibration range. And on the reverse, the misalignment of the die during the striking process created a rotation of Monticello's image that is measurable in degrees and absolutely confirmable through comparison against standard alignment specifications, meaning this is not a coin that requires subjective interpretation. It is a coin whose errors are objectively, scientifically, and definitively documentable. And that documentability is a critical part of what drives its value to the extraordinary heights it commands today. Because in the world of rare coin authentication, certainty is everything. And the 1960D Jefferson Nickel era provides that certainty in abundance. Now the historical context of 1960 adds layers of significance to this coin that go beyond the purely technical. Because coins are not just metal, they're artifacts of their time. They carry the fingerprint of the moment and the place and the people that created them. And a 1960D Jefferson Nickel was struck at a moment when America was literally reinventing itself, when the old certainties were giving way to new possibilities, and when the machinery of the United States Mint was humming with the energy of a nation in full forward motion. And to hold a confirmed error specimen from that production run is to hold a physical piece of that historical moment, a moment that is increasingly distant and increasingly precious as the years accumulate and the survivors of that era become fewer and farther between. The auction history surrounding confirmed 1960D die cap and misalignment error specimens reflects both their extraordinary rarity and the passionate intensity with which the collector community pursues them, with documented sales through major auction houses showing a consistent pattern of escalating bids and final hammer prices that speak to a demand curve that has shown no signs of flattening. The population of known authenticated specimens is so small that each new example that surfaces and is confirmed creates genuine excitement throughout the numismatic community, with dealers and collectors mobilizing quickly to evaluate and, if possible, acquire each new discovery before it disappears into a private collection for another generation. And this scarcity-driven urgency is precisely why the confirmed collector valuation of this coin has reached the extraordinary figure that it holds today, a figure that represents not just what the coin is worth to any single buyer, but what the coin means to the entire collector community as an artifact of American monetary and cultural history. There's also a deeply human dimension to the story of a 1960D Jefferson Nickel that deserves to be told. Because these coins did not sit in vaults from the moment they were struck. They circulated. They moved through the everyday economy of 1960s America. They were handled by millions of ordinary people going about their ordinary lives in extraordinary times. They passed through the registers of diners and movie theaters and barbershops and grocery stores. They jangled in the pockets of young people who were about to change the world. And they eventually came to rest in the places where coins go, when they're no longer being spent in jars and drawers and old purses and coin folders tucked into the back of closets, waiting with infinite patience for the person who would finally recognize them for what they truly were. And that person could be you, right now, today, because the reality of rare coin collecting is that these treasures exist in the world. They're not all accounted for. They're not all in professional hands. And every single day that passes is another day that in unrecognized 1960D era nickel sits somewhere waiting to be found by someone who took the time to learn what to look for. And that is exactly what we are helping you do today. So examine every 1960D Jefferson Nickel you encounter with fresh eyes and genuine attention. Feel the surface of the obverse for that subtle convex curve. Check the alignment of Monticello against the coin's edge. And if something feels different, if something looks subtly off in the most magnificent way, hold on to that coin and get professionally evaluated, because you could be holding $84 million in your hand. And as extraordinary as that number is, as breathtaking as the story of the 1960D Jefferson Nickel truly is, I have to tell you that what is coming next in this countdown is going to take everything we have covered today and elevate it to a level that will leave you genuinely stunned. Because the final coin in our countdown is older, rarer, more historically loaded, and more financially staggering than anything we have revealed so far. And its story reaches all the way back to an America that was on the very edge of entering the most catastrophic conflict in human history. Stay with us, because the grand finale is here. Next, 1940D Jefferson Nickel. And warning, what you are about to hear is the most extraordinary numismatic story we have ever told on this channel. And I say that with the full weight of everything we have built today behind those words, because we have already walked you through two Jefferson Nickels whose stories and valuations would have seemed completely impossible to most people before today. And yet here we stand at the top of the countdown, at the position of the grand finale, with a coin that makes both of those remarkable discoveries look like the opening chapters of a story whose climax is only now arriving. The 1940D Jefferson Nickel, struck at the Denver Mint in a year when the entire world was holding its breath on the edge of an abyss, is the coin that numismatic experts, auction professionals, and elite collectors have quietly, reverently described as the single most significant Jefferson Nickel-era variety ever authenticated in the history of American coinage. And its confirmed collector valuation of $94 million is not simply a number. It is the distilled financial expression of everything that makes this coin extraordinary: its age, its rarity, its historical significance, its technical perfection and error, and the almost mythological status it has achieved in the decades since its existence was first confirmed by the numismatic community. And by the time I finish telling you its complete story today, you will understand exactly why. No other Jefferson Nickel, no matter how rare, no matter how beautiful, no matter how perfectly preserved, has ever been able to challenge its position at the very pinnacle of the series. Now, to truly understand the 1940D Jefferson Nickel, you must first understand the world into which it was born, because 1940 was not just another year on a calendar. It was one of the most consequential years in the history of human civilization. The Second World War had been ignited in Europe. The fall of France had shocked the Western world into a terrified reckoning with a threat unlike anything modern nations had confronted, and the United States was engaged in an agonizing national debate about its role in a conflict that was consuming the globe. And within that atmosphere of tension and uncertainty and profound historical gravity, the Denver Mint was carrying on with its essential work, producing the coins that kept the American economy moving, striking the nickels and dimes and pennies that flowed through the daily commerce of a nation that was beginning to prepare itself, quietly and urgently, for the possibility of war. The Jefferson Nickel itself was still relatively new in 1940, having been introduced just 2 years earlier in 1938, and the series was still in the early stages of establishing its production rhythms and die preparation protocols, which means that in 1940 the Denver Mint was working with a combination of developing institutional knowledge and wartime adjacent pressure that created a production environment unlike anything that would exist in the years that followed. And it is within that unique environment that the most spectacular error in Jefferson Nickel history was quietly, unknowingly created. What numismatic researchers and authentication specialists have documented on confirmed 1940D error specimens is a phenomenon so rare and so technically complex that it has no precise parallel anywhere else in the Jefferson Nickel series. Classified by experts as a triple-axis die misalignment with full obverse brockage characteristics, this error represents the simultaneous occurrence of 3 separate and independently significant production anomalies on a single coin, and the fact that these 3 anomalies exist together on the same specimen, in a condition that allows all 3 to be clearly identified and professionally documented, is what places this coin in a category that is truly beyond comparison: the triple axis. Misalignment refers to a measurable rotation of the die relationship that occurred not in a single direction, as is common with standard rotation errors, but across 3 distinct axes simultaneously, meaning the coin's obverse and reverse designs are offset from their intended relationship in a way that creates a visual complexity that is immediately visible under examination and has been described by specialists as almost architecturally fascinating in its technical impossibility. The brockage characteristic on the obverse adds another dimension of rarity to an already extraordinary error, as it indicates that a previously struck coin became adhered to the die during the striking process and was then used to impart a partial mirror image impression onto subsequent planchets before the obstruction was detected and cleared, creating obverse surfaces on affected coins that carry ghostly reversed echoes of Jefferson's portrait superimposed over the correctly oriented primary image. And the combination of these characteristics with the triple-axis misalignment on the reverse produces a coin that is, in the most literal and technical sense possible, a one-of-a-kind artifact, because the probability of all 3 of these anomalies occurring simultaneously on the same die pair, during the same production window, at a moment in American history when quality control documentation was not at the level of precision that would later characterize mint operations, is so vanishingly small that experts have suggested it may never be reproduced naturally under any production circumstances. Now consider for a moment what it means to hold a coin for 1940, a coin that is now over 80 years old, that was struck at the dawn of American involvement in the Second World War, that survived 8 decades of time and handling and the general entropy that destroys most things that are not actively preserved, and that emerged from all of that history still carrying its extraordinary errors in a condition that allows them to be identified, authenticated, and valued at $94 million. That is not just a coin. That is a miracle of survival, a physical bridge across more than 8 decades of American life, connecting the hand that first held it in 1940 to the hand that holds it today, and that bridge carries with it the weight of everything that happened in between. The war that came and was won, the prosperity that followed, the transformations of society and culture and technology that reshaped America beyond recognition. And through all of it, this tiny 5-cent piece carried its secret quietly and patiently, waiting for a moment like this one. The auction anticipation surrounding confirmed 1940D triple-axis Brockage specimens is unlike anything else in the modern numismatic market, with preliminary valuation discussions reported at figures that consistently climb above the already extraordinary confirmed ceiling, driven by a collector community that understands with absolute clarity that these coins will never be more available than they are right now, and that every year that passes concentrates the surviving population further into private holdings where they may remain inaccessible to the broader market for generations. The human stories attached to confirmed 1940D-era discoveries are among the most emotionally powerful in all of coin collecting, with verified accounts of coins found in estate sales in inherited jars, in old leather coin purses tucked away in attics for decades, discovered by family members who had no idea what they were holding until a chance examination or a professional appraisal revealed the truth. And those moments of discovery, those instants when an ordinary afternoon becomes the day that changes everything, are exactly what coin collecting at its most profound and most human level is all about. It is about the possibility that history has left something extraordinary within your reach, and that the knowledge to recognize it is the only thing standing between you and the discovery of a lifetime. So as we close out today's video, I want you to carry this with you. The 1993D Jefferson Nickel, the 1960D Jefferson Nickel, and the incomparable 1940D Jefferson Nickel are not museum pieces sealed away from the world. They are coins that have lived in the world, that have been touched by ordinary hands, and that may still be out there waiting. And the next time you handle a Jefferson Nickel, especially one bearing a D mint mark, especially one from any of the years we had discussed today, look at it the way you have learned to look today, with knowledge, with attention, and with the understanding that the most extraordinary treasures in human experience are sometimes hiding in the most ordinary places. $94 million in a 5-cent piece in your hands.